Okay, so you've decided to build your own computer. That's very cool. Welcome to the ranks of the elite individuals who love to customize and build their own stuff. But you don't really know how, so I'm going to give you a few pointers on how to do that. I'm not going to build it for you, but basically give you some general information as to what the components are and how they fit into the computer case, and give you some tips so you can figure the rest out on your own. I think it'll be very cool. First of all, let me show you the components that make up the computer. So here we have everything that you're going to need for your new machine, and here's the first unit. This is the power supply. Every computer needs a power supply. These will plug into your motherboard, so you can get juice to all your components. So this plugs into the motherboard. Once this is installed in your case, this here will plug into the wall. That's where your power comes from. We'll mount that, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. This, of course, is DVD-ROM drive, so you can burn DVDs and install software. Gotta have one of those. These use an interface called a serial ATA connector. There's one power cord and there's one data connector right there. That's data, that's power. I'll show you how those work as well. Next component is your hard drive. This is a 1 terabyte drive. This one uses the same exact connectors that the DVD do. Almost all of them these days do. So we'll install this in the case. Of course, this is where you store your data and videos and games and things like that. This is your RAM or your memory that go into the case, into the motherboard. So this component will go into the motherboard itself. This gives you your 8 gigs of RAM, 16 gigs of RAM, however much you've purchased. These are the individual DIMMs or memory modules that go into the motherboard. So I'll show you how to install those as well. We're building a kind of an entry-level gaming machine. This is a pretty decent machine actually, and this is the video adapter. So this is going to be the display adapter. This plugs into the motherboard using a connector down here, which I'll have to pull that tape off and show you what that is. But this is a GeForce card. It's a 1050, so it's a pretty decent card, and it uses a PCI Express connector to connect into the motherboard. Of course, every computer needs a processor. This is the processor that we'll be using, and this processor goes into the motherboard as well. You need a fan that goes on top of that processor to keep it nice and cool. So this fan will be installed. The processor goes into the motherboard, and I'll show you about that and show you how that comes together. The fan goes on top of the processor, of course, to keep it cool because you don't want that overheating. And then the nerve center of the computer is the motherboard itself. So this is a motherboard, or a system board, like I like to call it. This is a MSI gaming system board. This system board has all your components you would normally see on your computer. It's got the PS2 connectors for mouse or keyboard. You've got a couple of USB ports. You got VGA here. We got since there's video built into the motherboard here, we have 2 connectors for video. This is VGA. This is DVI. We won't be using either of these since we have our own video card to install, and that card is going to have its own connectors back here. If we didn't use that card, then we could use these because these are built into the motherboard. Then over here we've got a couple more USBs. There's an S-Video out, network connector, 2 more USBs, and this is audio. So we've got the recording, and then your sound out, and then your auxiliary in. So all that stuff's on the outside of the computer. Once it's installed, you'll see those. This is the ZIF socket. This is the socket where the processor will be inserted and installed. Over here are the slots for your memory. So our RAM modules, which are these, are going to be installed into these modules on the motherboard. They can only go in one way. If you look at the bottom of the memory, there's a little slot there. And you can notice that the slot is closer to one end of this memory stick than it is the other. And that's so you can't get these in backwards. If you'll see, it'll line up one way. If you do it the other way, that little slot does not line up with that little red pinout right there. It can't go in that way. It's impossible. So this will be the way that it goes. And we'll show you how to install those in a few minutes here. Also on this motherboard you have this slot, which is PCI Express. That is where our video card will go. And once we get this into the case or into our chassis, then you'll be able to see how that works. Get a couple of PCI Express slots here for other things which we won't be using in this computer. But so our processor will go into this slot here, and I'll show you how to install that. And then once that's installed, our fan will be installed on top of that processor so it can keep it cool while the computer is up and running. Almost forgot the case itself, or the chassis. You got to have one of those. This is the case of the computer. We're using a Sharkoon case. It's a pretty cool case with lighting inside. It's also got the green accents on the inside. So I'll show you how that works as well. The motherboard, of course, is going to be installed into this as well as some other things, so you can get the whole system together and working. And then once you apply your power, you're basically done. Then you can turn it on, install your operating system, and you'll be ready to get your computer going. So those are the components of the computer, whether you're building a $3,000 gaming rig or an entry-level workstation for your office. Those are the components that you would use. And so in just a moment, we're going to show you how to install those and how each of the components fits together.